Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Monday. What is it? 24th even. 24th of September 2018. And it should be a beautiful early autumn morning up here on the moors of East Lancashire. But sadly, once again, the sky has been seriously fracked, and the glare through the sheen that has been painted across the sun is absolutely blinding. But if you're anywhere in the East Lancashire area, then take a look up and see what's occurring here, because at the very least, this is a level of pollution that the British government just doesn't want to admit to, despite the Royal Society a number of years ago discussing this whole issue of geoengineering. And you know, we are very much concerned about the intent to frack right across the north of England. But you know, perhaps we should actually start looking up and seeing what's going on above our head. And as is always the case, you know, do your own research and look at the research papers, and I say specifically at the Royal Society, who have all discussed geoengineering at some considerable length, but yet where cognitive dissonance reigns supreme in Parliament, and particularly within the Green Party. It's like, no, can't go there, not allowed to talk about geoengineering. Well, maybe it's time that it started to come more into the vocabulary. Well, meanwhile, this morning I woke up to see that at 4:15 or thereabouts this morning, the people camped out at Preston Road were rudely awakened by the local corporate enforcement officers, otherwise known as police, but they're masquerading as police really. But they woke everybody up and said, you know, basically you're corralled now because we're bringing kit in for Quadrilla. So this is obviously Quadrilla still working on the basis that they can blag more money out of Centrica. But one of the interesting facets here is that, of course, the intellectual pygmy, Claire Perry. And I mean, let's understand what's going on here, by the way, because Greg Clark would, by all accounts, be a very astute kiddie, you know, Teesside boy. And, you know, he's in office as Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And, you know, word is that he is quietly ambitious. And he knows fine well that this whole issue of unconventional hydrocarbon exploitation, i.e. fracking, is a potential career killer. So what has he done? He's appointed the... There's no other word for it. The intellectual pygmy. I mean, she's not exactly the smartest kid on the block. It would seem that perhaps that was all devices had to pick from when they went to the polls. But Claire Perry, she who actually has the audacity to suggest that any council that has a fracking application submitted to them will be subjected to a travelling circus of protesters. Well, you know, clearly, you know, she's not particularly well travelled, and you know, certainly devices is not under any threat, and she's not about to go and visit any of the constituencies around the country that are under threat. So Greg Clark puts her on point to be the mouthpiece, which of course gives him the plausible deniability. But ultimately, Greg, it is still your responsibility. The buck stops with you. So, you know, we, I think, appreciate what you're doing regarding permitted development. And it does seem to be having the desired effect, because as far as I'm aware, there isn't a single council, whether it's parish, district or county council, there isn't a single council that has embraced your proposition to make the drilling of exploratory wells for unconventional hydrocarbons permitted development. And So Claire Perry is the mouthpiece, but it's your baby. And if it does go seriously wrong, which it will, of course, if they start firing up the pump trucks, then it's your political career that is absolutely on the line. Now, last week, I also flagged up and reminded people, and I say reminded because, you know, I have been with others, I mean, we've been flagging this up now for nearly 4 years, that radioactive waste management are desperate to find the permanent solution that they are required to find by international law for the permanent disposal of toxic nuclear waste. And on Friday, I pointed out that the whole issue of permitted development for exploratory wells is actually quite probably related more to the disposal of toxic nuclear waste. So back in April 2015, the British government quietly slipped through, just in the last week of Parliament before it went into Easter recess, an amendment to the Infrastructure Act which gave the government permission to pretty much bury anything it wanted down these wells without seeking any permission from the local community. So that's now quietly forgotten, of course, by most people 3.5 years on. And so permitted development to get these wells drilled without actually asking anyone any permission means that they can drill the wells and then throw the toxic nuclear waste down those boreholes without any consultation whatsoever. And of course, over the weekend, a number of people have made contact with me asking me for the links. You know, where's your evidence? The evidence is all there. In fact, I linked a lot of the evidence under Friday's live stream, both on YouTube and on Facebook. But, you know, maybe we have to keep doing it because, you know, people absolutely need to come to the realization that the sociopaths who are driving this corporatist agenda don't give a flying frack about the health or well-being of the wider population. And if they're able to drill the wells and then throw the toxic nuclear waste down those wells without having to consult with anybody, then so much the better for them. And of course, when the cancer clusters start to appear around those wells, and that might take a few years. You know, it's here we are today in the early part of the 21st century, some 40 years after the nuclear waste was being dumped in the Herd Deep, the trench, which isn't that deep, just to the north of the Channel Islands. And so, you know, not only are there cancer clusters in the Channel Islands, but the island of Alderney has no children on it whatsoever because the leukemia rate was nigh on 100%. So it's really, really important that people start taking an interest. So permitted development, or the intent to make the exploratory drilling of unconventional wells permitted development, has got the attention of local authorities right around the country. And I think people are realising, certainly councillors are realising, that this is a thin end of a very, very fat wedge. Because if you can make something like this permitted development, then you know, you can pretty much make everything permitted development, and then ultimately you just do away with the local authorities. And, you know, we're seeing the democracy, or the charade of democracy, literally evaporating before our faces. And, you know, the problem is that the vast majority of people are time poor. You know, they are run ragged trying to earn enough money to keep food on the table and a roof over the heads of the family. And this is exactly what the sociopaths in this corporatocracy rely upon. And of course, if the corporations aren't able to get their way, what do? They go running to the courts. And, you know, what we are seeing is the critichy, the dictocracy, the rule by judges. And this absolutely has to be challenged. And of course, they absolutely rely on the basis that, you know, nobody has the funds to engage, you know, legal counsel to make these challenges. In fact, so much so that, you know, they're not even bothering to try and adhere to any proper judicial process. They are simply seeking ex parte hearings, secret hearings on the backs of lies and deception. And the judiciary, who would appear to live in their little bubble, then, you know, they take everything at face value. So, you know, here we are, early autumn 2018, with not only the population of the north of England in particular under massive threat from the contamination of the unconventional gas industry, but on a wider basis, you're seeing democracy, or the charade of democracy, the veneer just literally ripped away. And, you know, of course there are people who are going to say, no, that's just rampant conspiracy. And, of course, that's exactly what they want you to perceive. But as is always the case, please do your own research and see what's occurring here, because unless we, the collective we, actually make the effort to get involved here, then the legacy that we are leaving future generations is one of absolute abject misery. Meanwhile, you know, a handful of people make out like bandits. The only saving grace is that at some point they will pay a massive price, but they probably don't even realize that. Thanks for joining me today. It is a beautiful day up here, and you know, the reservoir here is very low despite the phenomenal amount of rainfall that's fallen over the north of England over the last few days. But the reservoir is extremely low, and yet Quadrilla are bringing on the frack kit. And of course it shouldn't be any surprise that you know, the hose pipe ban that was going to be put in place in early August was lifted, and since then United Utilities have had their fingers crossed, hoping for massive amounts of rain. Well, you know, if we have a dry autumn, then, you know, the north of England is actually looking to be in a bit of difficulty regarding its water supply. One final element I almost forgot, and this is for the people of the Preston New Road area, the Blackpool area. You know, when the permission was given for Quadrilla to frack their first well, they had to put up a bond of £557,000. I haven't seen any mention yet of a similar bond for the second well. So on the basis that, you know, it was deemed that Quadrilla's finances were sufficiently dodgy to require a bond of over £500,000 for the first well, then surely they need it for the second well too. So, you know, for all those people in the Blackpool area, the Preston New Road area, maybe even further afield, perhaps it's time to start submitting the Freedom of Information requests to the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy and ask why there's no bond, apparently, for the second well. Who picks up the tab when that goes seriously south? Anyway, enough for today. I'm going to enjoy a short walk around the reservoir before getting back to the preparation for challenging the IGAS injunction in the Royal Courts in London, at Fetters Lane, London, on Tuesday the 2nd of October. So hopefully if you're in the southeast of England, you're going to be able to come along and see what transpires, because I think there's another injunction hearing scheduled in the same court on the same day. But I will be back, meantime, tomorrow. No, I won't. I'm going to be back on Wednesday morning at 8:30. Take care.